Greetings, all you lovers of lore and legend, whether student, teacher, parent, teller of tales, or guests on the Iron Age Abyssinian equivalent of that Hot Ones YouTube show.
The Great Tales is a podcast about myths and legends from both inside and outside the Christian tradition, and we come to you live twice a month to talk about these great stories that Christians have been reading and passing on for centuries, and sometimes even longer than that.
Last time we began our conversation on the Kebra Negast, the national epic of Ethiopia, and today we will complete that discussion.
Right, so our conversation in the last episode essentially set up the frame narrative for the Kebra Negast, which is a discussion held at the First Ecumenical Council about the glory of kings, which began with the kingship of Adam, the first created man. From there, we talked about the tabernacle as a heavenly reality, and how in this text it essentially maps onto Zion and the holy Theotokos herself, as well as, notably, the Ark of the Covenant. This time, we are going to tell the story of how the Ark made it to Ethiopia.
Finally. We kind of promised that somewhat last time, but we didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't.
You guys sort of know the drill by now, which is that if I'm writing the script, it's a 3-parter. And then Father Andrew makes me trim it down to a 2-parter.
Yeah, 2-parter, exactly. So, so one would not normally think of this podcast as being about current events.
That's right.
But for those of you who watch the weird side of the news, like I do, I don't know, do you, Richard, do you keep watching the weird side of the news?
Basically exclusively. I don't really care about normal people things, but weird stuff. Weird stuff I'm into.
Yeah. So for those of you who keep your eye on this kind of thing, I'm sure that you've heard recently, or maybe you didn't hear, that recently declassified documents. I can't believe I haven't said that phrase on a show that I'm on.
It's a real thing.
It's true. This is true. I'm not making this up. Recently declassified documents indicate that the CIA was conducting a program with remote viewers, which is to say, psychics, to try to locate the Ark of the Covenant. This is true. This was called Project Sunstreak, and I'm told that they utilized only top men, and supposedly these psychics claimed that the Ark was somewhere in the Middle East.
So here at this point, I have to say that you have opened up a whole can of worms, not just for the internet, but for me personally. Something I am...
You engage a little remote viewing there, Richard?
No, but I definitely engage in the reading of remote viewing reports. So this is like a weird hobby of mine. So every few years, they'll do like one of these big dumps of documents onto WikiLeaks. And then recently, the current administration has just been declassifying tons of stuff. And so that's where this particular one I think was declassified as part of the declassification of a bunch of stuff from the CIA, like Cold War era stuff. But if you follow WikiLeaks, you'll know that there have actually been multiple remote viewing programs which were conducted all the way up into the 90s by both American intelligence. You can decide if that's an oxymoron or not, but by both American intelligence and also by the USSR and its successor states.
How about
that?
And
so there are significant documents out there that will actually also tell you about things uncovered by Soviet remote viewing programs.
Wow.
Anyway, so I'm interested in this stuff because it's weird and fun and interesting, and it cannot be stressed enough that these are actual government programs which produced actual reports, which
tax dollars at work.
Which your tax dollars, or really probably like your grandparents' tax dollars, paid for. So Project Sunstreak. So here's how the Daily Mail broke the story. I'm going to just read the description. One of the descriptions. There's actually a follow-up out there, which I wish I'd had the link for, but there's actually a follow-up out there now with the actual psychic.
Yeah, no, this bit I've given you here in the script has some quotes from the psychic.
Yeah, okay, yeah, but there's like a longer interview.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you're just going to have to Google this up, people, if you want to see, prove that we are not making this up. These are actual declassified documents.
Yeah, so here's what it says in the Daily Mail article. The psychic described nearby buildings that resembled mosque domes, an individual clothed virtually all in white with black hair and dark eyes. One figure I homed in on wore a mustache, they wrote. The target is hidden underground. Dark and wet were all aspects of the location and the target. The purpose of the target is to bring a people together. It has something to do with ceremony, memory, homage, the resurrection. There's an aspect of spirituality, information, lessons, and historical knowledge far beyond what we now know. The target is protected by entities and can only be opened now by those who are authorized to do so. This container will not/cannot be opened until the time is deemed correct. The psychic goes on to say that when this time comes, the mechanics of the lock system will be found to be fairly simple, and that anyone who attempts to open the container by prying or striking will be destroyed by the container's protectors through the use of a power unknown to us.
Yeah, I don't know about you, but don't look at it.
I mean,
so it might be, and I don't mean the mustachioed Ark Guardian either.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing is that the well, we're going to talk about how the Ark comes to Ethiopia, and it's certainly the contention of the Ethiopian Tawido Church that they have the Ark, and that it's that they have it. There's a guardian.
Yeah.
It gets
I see
on.
that Simon put up one of the a screenshot of one of the actual documents.
Oh, fantastic!
Yes. I love that.
What an MVP.
Man, you go, Simon. Yeah. Simon, by the way, is our YouTube guy, everybody, and we have Mike Tegan as our producer this time around. So,
yeah. I mean, we can get. I mean, maybe we don't want to make this the episode where we talk about like whether or not remote viewing is a real thing. Okay, but I mean the thing. Okay,
I don't.
So here's the thing. Here's the thing is that if you I mean, I believe that occult practices do sometimes work because you are interfacing with demons, and sometimes demons will give you what you want, or they'll let you think that they have given you what you want.
Yeah, and I will say, I mean, again, I'm not giving a ruling on whether this psychic saw anything,
right?
But there are weirdly a number of similarities between what the psychic said and the script for Indiana Jones. For Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I mean, this is the thing. Like, you could have just seen Raiders of the Lost Ark and then dropped some acid and then wrote a report for the CIA. And that also doesn't mean that you didn't also meet demons. Like none of these things are mutually exclusive.
Right. All of the above.
Yeah. Anyway, but this is just very fun. I mean, kids, I just want you to, like, when someday you are talking to your parents about where you want to go to school, and you say something like, I want to get a degree in whatever it is Richard Rowland is talking about, which I know is like forefront on everyone's mind.
That's what my kids are saying.
I know. And your parents say, okay, but what are you going to do with that? The answer is headline news.
I'm going to write for the Daily Mail.
Like, you're just going to be like, listen, every friend group needs an Ark of the Covenant expert.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's a thing.
But I mean, on a very, not that this hasn't been serious, but on a very serious note, I think that why out of the massive pile of declassified documents, why is it that this set of them made the news? Well, it's because there's something very compelling about the Ark of the Covenant.
Right, of course.
There's something about this object that calls to people. I mean, there's a reason that they made that movie in the early 80s, which, by the way, I don't know if I can't remember if I said this in the last episode. I was so scared when I saw that movie. I was a little kid when it came out.
Oh, man.
I was so scared when I saw that movie. And my dad even took me to a movie theater to see it, that I literally ran out the back and out into the parking lot, and my dad had to come find me. I've always been tenderhearted about that kind of stuff. This is why I can't watch horror movies. Still can't.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I actually recently showed the movie to my kids, which I feel like I probably showed some of the older ones a long time ago. But anyway, so we just watched it again recently before Lent, and watched that, and then we skipped Temple of Doom and we watched Last Crusade. And
Temple of Doom is a very heartrending film.
That is one way to put it. That's one way to put it. My favorite part in Temple of Doom is when they're at the rope bridge, and the guy comes out and he's like whipping the swords around, and Indy has a sword and he's like, screw this, and he just shoots him. Which is a real thing that a young Winston Churchill did when he was in India as part of the British Raj. That's a real story about him when he was like a young, as the British would say, lieutenant. Is that he was attacked by a sword-wielding guy, and he was going to fence with him, and then he thought better of it and just pulled out his revolver and shot the guy.
I thought you were going to say that your favorite part was the chilled monkey brains. But that's okay. So what are we talking about today with regards to the Ark of the Covenant?
I hope we didn't. I feel like we just got this video like demonetized or something. Okay. All right. So... All right. So where kind of we last left off is sort of setting up the importance of the Ark. What is the Ark, and how is the Ark connected to this idea of divine kingship? And we talked about the way in other ancient cultures, for instance, in Egyptian paganism, that they also had arks, and those arks were very closely connected with the role of the king and his ability to look upon the face of the god and to be basically numbered among the gods. Right. And so one of the things the Kebra Negast is doing is showing how that pattern works in a framework where there is only one Most High God.
Oh, by the way, so I was going to say, I have to say, though, one of our chatters, Josef Svenningsson, who probably is, clearly from Florida, or a name like that, he says that the shooting the sword guy scene happens in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I think that's right, Josef. Now that I think about it, I think you're right. I don't know. Well, anyway, this is Indiana Jones, but I think that's right. Yeah, so I appreciate. Okay. Listen, technically correct is the best kind of correct to be. So, thank you.
Validation for the nerds.
That's right. Yeah. All right. So, so after this, we get in the Kebra Negast, we get a digression that will be returned to later on after the story of the Ark kind of concludes, which is has to do with kind of tracing the kings of the world and this idea that the world was meant to be divided between the king of Rome, by which is meant the emperor at Constantinople, and then the king of Ethiopia. And in the Kebra Negast, they trace the line of the Caesars. Never mind, this is genealogically or historically problematic. That's not the point. But they trace the line of the Caesars back to the line of Shem. Just as they are about to trace also the kings of Ethiopia back to the line of Shem, despite the fact that, of course, according to the Table of Nations in Genesis, the people of Africa are descended from Ham, and people of Europe are descended from Japheth. But there's this prophecy in Genesis about how Shem is going to rule. And so it's important for you can think about different ways, the triumph of Christianity and so on, that prophecy is really fulfilled in history. But,
sure, of course.
But in any case, the vast overwhelming majority of the world worships in some kind of Semitic faith, right? Christianity, Judaism, Islam. But in any case, not hugely important. And some people want to make a whole thing about that, and I'm just not your guy if that's the conversation you want to have. But in any case, what the Kebra Negast tries to do is basically take that idea and develop it symbolically and trace the lineages of the kings of various ancient empires back to Shem using the Table of Nations Genesis in some way. And it's important to note that the Table of Nations in the book of Genesis, I think it's chapter 11, that this is... That is a really important source. It is kind of the launching point for most medieval and late antiquity works of universal history, because it's basically where everybody starts when trying to trace, okay, which son of Noah are my people descended from, which then tells us where we fit into the story. Yeah. Right. So that's I would say, and that's in everything. That's in like Scandinavian, Northern Germanic Christianity. As soon as they convert, that's one of the things they do is they start tracing themselves back to the sons of Noah, tracing themselves all the way back to the Ark. Even this idea that shield or sheaf was a fourth son of Noah born on the Ark, which is a very common myth all over kind of the ancient world, is that there was this fourth son of Noah, and my people are actually descended from him.
Yeah, and I was going to say that I mean, this also participates in a polemic against paganism, because in paganism, different people groups are separate creations, from various different gods. Which is why I like to say that paganism is inherently racist, whereas in the religion of the Bible, everyone is descended from one pair, Adam and Eve, and then of course there's this other inflection point, Noah and his sons. Right. So everyone is common, and this is important. This is not just a point about the origin of mankind. This is a Christologically important point.
Absolutely.
Too.
If it's not true, then our whole soteriology can't be
right. We're not. Which one of us, which group of us, is consubstantial with Christ? If we're from His people group and not from some other one.
Right.
The point is that all people are humans.
That's the whole point of the genealogy in Luke's gospel, going all the way back to Adam.
Right.
That's the point. That's the point. Yeah.
Yep.
So we get this kind of digression of how the world is kind of divided up between the king of Rome, the king of Ethiopia. And then the story resumes with the account of the Queen of Sheba, or the Queen of the South, who comes to Solomon. This story is basically the heart of the Kebra Negast. It's the account that is given in the Kebra Negast is significantly older. I mean, this is a legend which significantly predates Christianity. It's significantly older than the writing of the Kebra Negast itself. So we're not saying it originated with this retelling, but
it's reflected in the Bible.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. But it is the story that the rest of the Kebra Negast is built around, and in many ways, it functions as basically a midrash, which is a particular kind of Hebraic commentary where you would look for holes. When I say holes, I mean obvious gaps in the biblical text, which include things like when Nebuchadnezzar sacks the temple in Jerusalem, the ark is not listed among the things that are carried off. But it is something of such great importance to the Jewish faith that surely if the ark had been present there at that time, it would have been carried away. Yeah. So the question is, why it would have been listed among the things that were lost. So if that's not the case, if the ark is absent, and by the way, Josephus will tell you the ark has been missing. Basically, every ancient Jewish historian will tell you the ark is missing. I mean, it's a major kind of point during the Maccabean revolt. It's also a major kind of point, for instance, when Pompey comes to Jerusalem and he walks into the holy place and he looks around. There's nothing there.
Nothing
and he's like,
there.
Oh, these Jews, they worship God in mind only. That's mentally so impressive. It's not really the case. It's just that the ark is missing and had been missing for a really long time.
For a while. Yeah.
And so the question is, why is it missing? Where did it go to? And they kind of take some different things and put them together. And then obviously there's also just this very old oral tradition in Ethiopia itself that they have the ark. And I personally do not believe it is an unreasonable claim, but let's get into the story.
Yes, okay. Yes.
So, how this queen was born, speaking of the Queen of Sheba, or the Queen of the South, I have written in that manuscript, and in this manner also doth the evangelist mention that woman. And our Lord Jesus Christ, in condemning the Jewish people, the crucifiers who lived at that time, spake, saying, The Queen of the South shall rise up on the day of judgment, and shall dispute with and condemn and overcome this generation, who would not hearken unto the preaching of my word. For she came from the ends of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And of course it goes on in the gospel to say, but one greater than Solomon is here, right? And the Queen of the South, from whom he spoke, of whom he spake, was the Queen of Ethiopia. And in the words, the ends of the earth, he maketh allusion to the delicacy of the constitution of women. Does he? And the long distance of the journey, and the burning heat of the sun, and the hunger on the way, and the thirst for water. In other words, it's a long trip from Ethiopia to Palestine, especially back in the day. You've got to cross a desert. And this Queen of the South was very beautiful in face, and her stature was superb, and her understanding and intelligence, which God had given her, were of such high character that she went to Jerusalem to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Now this was done by the command of God, and was his good pleasure. And so the Queen of Sheba, via one of her servants, Tamarin, who actually gets a ton of, you could say, screen time in the Kebra Negast, we're kind of skipping over multiple chapters of here's all of Tamarin's business dealings, which people were very interested in.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, that reminds me
like,
somewhat of, if you've ever read Les Miserables. Have you read that book?
Yes, of course.
Of course, it goes on and on and on about the military career in the Napoleonic Wars of Monsieur Thénardier.
Right.
But you're like, why is this relevant? Why?
Right. I mean,
why?
In that case, it's because Les Miserables was originally published serialized, and you had to paid, you got paid by the word. Yeah, paid by the word. My favorite ultra long novel of the kind of that era is Bleak House by Charles Dickens.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Moby Dick, which has all those chapters about whaling.
I mean, okay, whaling is really cool though. Boy, if anything is going to get us demonetized,
is that what y'all do there in Texas?
Yeah, so much whaling in Texas. You have no idea.
In the Gulf of
America,
Texas,
the Gulf of Texas.
Oh, I thought you were calling it the Gulf of Texas.
Oh yeah, I mean, dear gentle listener, at this point you need to know that I went through an extensive whaling phase when I was in my teens.
As one does.
How some kids get into, I don't know, Pokemon or something. I was like, okay, but so I read tons and tons of books, and they were mostly travelers' firsthand accounts of
I had no idea this would trigger
being with the. I have a lot of triggers apparently, but it's really not that hard to get me going on something. But I read a bunch of firsthand accounts of like Aleut tribes and like the Aleutian Islanders and Inuit, and basically like the different ways that they hunted whale. And I was just deeply fascinated by this. I even wrote a bunch of what can only be categorized as whaling fanfic.
Wow.
And so by the time I got around to
Ambergris Avengers or something like this, yes.
So when I got around to reading Moby Dick, I was like, I already kind of know all of this. And so Moby Dick really just kind of didn't land for me. I should probably go back and try to read it again. But in any case, so I did go through a whaling phase. I think whaling is actually super fascinating. I mean, and it's really, for me, it's about the logistics. That's what appeals to me. It's the sheer logistics of killing something that large and then getting it back home and divvying it up. I mean, that's the sort of experience that brings people together. You know what I'm saying?
There's a song about whaling in Carousel, in the Rodgers and Hammerstein musical.
I see. I didn't know that. You're the musical guy.
Yeah. Blow high, blow low, a whaling we will go.
I do have
sailing away.
I do have a pretty extensive like whaling themed sea shanty playlist, which I still listen to on occasion. Wow. So yeah, this was the digression no one was expecting. Nobody was expecting this. Yeah.
So yes, the many business dealings of Tamarin.
Yes,
who's the shrewd. The shrewd guy.
Yeah. So Tamarin is a very successful businessman. We get a few chapters on this, but in any case, he has been conducting trade with Solomon, and Solomon's specifically been getting stuff from him for the building of the temple and his other many building projects. And so he's experienced Solomon's wealth, wisdom, and glory firsthand. And the queen hears about it from Tamarin and decides that she's got to see it for herself. Yeah. So she undertakes this arduous journey from the ends of the earth, especially with the delicate constitution of women, to see Solomon for herself.
Yeah, and so this is what the text says about this. And she arrived in Jerusalem and brought to the king very many precious gifts, which he desired to possess greatly. And he paid her great honor and rejoiced, and he gave her a habitation in the royal palace near him. And he sent her food both for the morning and evening meal, each time 15 measures by the kori, I don't know, some kind of measurement, of finely ground white meal, cooked with oil and gravy and sauce in abundance. Oh, he sent her biscuits and gravy.
He did.
All right.
And I wanted to actually sort of point this out, but also like this is some of my...
I'm so happy about this.
So we have a number of members of our parish who are from Eritrean background, but who were received into our church.
Yeah.
And
do they have biscuits and gravy there?
Well, there's an equivalent. It's really good.
Okay.
It's really good.
You know, when I lived in West Virginia, there was a whole fast food restaurant dedicated to biscuits and gravy.
Because
that's West Virginia.
I mean, yeah, I love biscuits.
Called Tudors.
But anyway, but we do have we usually do it meat fair Sunday or a Sunday like right before meat fair, where we have like a big Eritrean cooking day, and it's like it's the only time of the year I will use I have to teach catechism class after this privileges to skip to the front of the line. I'll never do that otherwise. but on that day it's like, no, I really do actually want to get some of this. So,
okay.
All right,
Sorry. Biscuits and gravy. And 30 measures by the quarry of crushed white meal, wherefrom bread for 350 people was made, with the necessary platters and trays, and 10 stalled oxen, and 5 bulls, and 50 sheep, without counting the kids and deer and gazelles and fatted fowls, and a vessel of wine containing 60 garrote measures, and 30 measures of old wine, and 25 singing men, and 25 singing women, and the finest honey and rich sweets, and some of the food which he himself ate, and some of the wine whereof he drank. And every day he arrayed her in 11 garments, which bewitched the eyes. At once? I hope it's in succession.
No. I really think it was just like one after the other. I just have to say, like, part of the reason I included this. Part of the reason I included this is just it's so beautiful and so like not modern taste in storytelling. Like, these aren't the sort of things I was thinking about it as I was putting the notes together. You know, our food comes to us, you know, in such disposable ways. Like, we even like, you know, I mean, we, you know, plasticware, like paper plates. And listen, I have 6 kids. You think I don't use paper and our house is flooded? Like, you think I don't use paper plates every day? But the point is that if you're in a culture where things aren't disposable in this level, when you like get a meal together, it's a serious undertaking, and everybody reading this has an idea. Like, they can visualize this, and you start with, you know, let's start with the morning and the evening meal. How much food for the morning meal? How much, you know, 15 measures of this fine white ground white meal, which is a particular kind of grain, cooked with oil and gravy and sauce in abundance, and then 30 measures more that we're going to make this really fine bread out of. That's not coarse bread. It's not rough. It's really good. It's really fluffy. It's really tasty. And then also all the necessary platters and trays for all this food. And then let's get into the meat. 10 oxen, 5 bulls, right. 50 sheep, not even counting all the baby goats, not even counting the deer, the gazelles, the fatted fowls, all the wine, and then 25 singing men and 25 singing women, finest honey, rich, and it just kind of goes on and on and on. The point
10
is,
drummers drumming.
This is an insane amount of food and beauty and ceremony, and it kind of goes from like the littlest thing to more and more extravagant things.
Yeah,
and you know, and he's doing this twice a day.
I mean, obviously, you know, trade has been good. Taxes are up. You know, revenue is very, very good.
That's right.
Yeah.
So it's very clear as the text goes on that Solomon and Queen Makeda are like really perfect. That's her name, by the way, Makeda. That they're really perfect for each other.
Not to be confused with the drill.
Right. I have one of those spread over there, actually. Don't get me started on drills, Father. No, I'm kidding.
No.
I do have opinions, though. So it's
we'll save those bits for later.
Oh boy. So it's very clear that they're like perfect for each other. They're both really, really wise. They have a bunch of these different dialogues, and the subtext of the dialogues that they have together on sort of different matters of wisdom, you know, is is that nobody else is really on their level. You know, it's like there's that couple, and Solomon is like, oh, I got all these women around here, but finally someone I can talk to. You know, and then same thing for Makeda, who is the opposite of Solomon, in that Solomon has a bunch of wives at this point, although the text is very clear that he's mistaken in having multiple wives. There's actually a long digression, not a long, but there's a digression in the Kebra Negast about polygamy and why it was practiced by some people in the Old Testament and why we shouldn't do it now. And we know,
it's against the Torah, especially for kings.
Right. It's against the Torah, especially for kings. But it basically, at this point, Solomon's wives haven't led him astray yet. And so it's more like he was like, well, I've got to make sure I get a son, and he just can't get a son, you know. And in any case,
nice use of the word "get" there. That's good.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yep.
And And then Makeda on the other side, it's the law of the land of Ethiopia that it's always ruled over by a virgin queen. And so she's the opposite of him, in that sense, right? But it's also like, oh, this is the first person, and that part of the idea of being the virgin queen is this idea that she's peerless, that there's nobody else in the kingdom who's really her equal either. And so basically, like, for each of them, it's like, for the first time, I've met somebody who's really on my level. So they have all these dialogues. There's this famous dialogue that's like the contemplation on the laborer, where Solomon sort of like picks a laborer out of the crowd, like at one of his building projects at random, and it says, now look at this guy here and see how I'm not that different from him. And anyway, just all this sort of like stuff, considering like, what's the nature of man? What does it even mean to be human? What about the stars and planets? Just like all the big metaphysical conversations. And we get, several chapters of this, which are intended to give us kind of extensive displays of Solomon's wisdom, and also show how Makeda is kind of on her same level. And so King Solomon answered and said unto her, wisdom. So finally he gives her the secret to his wisdom. By the way, there are several kind of little aside remarks that are like, well, Makeda is actually also this wise, and she didn't have to do all the things Solomon had to do. She's just naturally very wise. But anyway, so Solomon lets her in on the secret of wisdom. It says, and King Solomon answered and said unto her, wisdom and understanding spring from thee thyself. So this is one of those. It's like, you're just naturally wise. As for me, I only possess them in the measure in which the God of Israel hath given them to me, because I asked and entreated them from him. And thou, although thou dost not know the God of Israel, hast this wisdom which thou hast made to grow in thine heart. And it hath made thee come to see me, the vassal and slave of my God, and the building of his sanctuary, which I am establishing, that's the temple, wherein I serve and move round about my lady, the tabernacle of the law of God in Israel, the holy and heavenly Zion. And of course, throughout the people of Jerusalem use this phrase, my lady, to talk about the ark, which is obviously intended to sort of remind us of the Theotokos. Yeah, but also the idea here is that, Solomon's got all these wives, but the real lady, his real love, is the ark. Yeah, and just again, as we said last time, the ark equals the Theotokos, equals Zion, equals the tabernacle, equals the temple. Like, these things are all kind of one big continuum, So Solomon's big project is, of course, the building of the temple, which is mainly intended to be a dwelling place for the ark, which is fair. Like, that's what the temple is for. Because to be noted that even though God does dwell there, eventually, it's clear that he's kind of condescending to it. That's right. Yeah. It seems to be kind of reluctant because, as it says many times in Scripture, he does not dwell in temples made by hands. In other words, which means he's not limited. It doesn't mean that he's not there. It means he's not limited. Right. So, one of the main ways that we see his wisdom on display in the Kebra Negast is the way that he perfectly directs the efforts of the workmen. It is once again the logistical efforts which are impressive. I'm just saying, people in the ancient, like, when you have to do things by hand, or really like do anything at all, that's really intensive in this way, it's like becomes your entire life. You do appreciate the logistical efforts involved in things, I think, a lot more. Oh, sure. I mean, the instructions, like the instructions for building the tabernacle in the Bible, are incredibly detailed. And then when it says that they made them, it goes through the whole thing again. Right. To show that they were doing it exactly according to the pattern that God gave. But I mean, you can just think about, so you worked as a stagehand for quite some time, right? And so if you go to see a theatrical production, you are going to see and appreciate things that I would not see and appreciate. Yeah, I mean, as soon as I walk into any theater, first thing I do is I look up. Yeah, right, exactly. To look at the catwalks and the lighting, and then I kind of look around the corners and... Right. And there are things that have been related to the various trades that I've worked that are similar, where, if I see, I'm a data scientist by trade. So if I see somebody publishes like some kind of a big report or something like that, I'll be like, I have questions about the math that you use here, or, oh, this, That's when you use these language like z-score and p-value, and that's exactly. I don't know. Right. I've heard those words. Yeah. And I've looked them up, and I'm still like, I still don't know what this means. it's one of those
Of your
things.
people.
Yeah, it's just one of those things. Like every trade has its own kind of internal thing, and so a lot of the demonstrations of Solomon's wisdom, and this is true across the ancient world and depictions of Solomon. Obviously, there's the stuff that comes later in Jewish mysticism about Solomon, and also Islamic mysticism about Solomon, controlling demons and summoning jinn and all these things. But the earlier displays of his wisdom come specifically in his ability to build and direct these projects.
Well, right, because I mean, of the various kinds of knowledge, wisdom is generally how-to knowledge. It's the knowledge of how to do something. It's not knowledge about stuff. It's skill.
Right. And I think there's something about architecture in particular, since this is an Orthodox podcast. We love architecture, and we tend in the Orthodox Church, and we tend to, although there are, exceptions, but we tend to build churches in a certain way, and we tend to ascribe a certain kind of meaning to the way that we build things, right? And I'm personally just very sensitive to the things that architecture means, and that's why I get a migraine if I go into an IKEA, because it's this giant rectangular maze intentionally made designed to make it hard for me to find the exit and buy a lot of stuff while I'm there, and I'm not even sort of joking. Like, I get a major headache going into an IKEA.
The key is to bring in a ball of twine and attach it
that's what it is.
to the front where they're serving those Swedish meatballs.
That's right.
And, then you
but see, at our IKEA, they put the main meatball thing like in the middle. So you have to like fight your way there.
I tried the meatballs one time, and no offense to Sweden and her people, but I don't know. I mean, I've heard all these people rave about IKEA meatballs, but the one time I had them, they were the most vile, disgusting thing. And I was like, I am never doing that again. I feel like this is some kind of trap.
In my family, we have a really good Swedish meatball recipe. Don't judge the genre by IKEA for sure.
All right. I've had Swedish meatballs otherwise.
Their meatballs are to real meatballs what their furniture is to real furniture. Like which is to say, it's all made out of sawdust. But
some kind of recombinate.
Yeah. All right. So, but the point is that architecture is a way of embodying meaning in the world in the most, I don't know, this is the most incarnational sense, and so that's why architecture is connected to wisdom in this way in the ancient world. Same thing with Moses, right? There's also a tradition about Moses being a magician and all these other things. But before that, he's the one who builds the temple, right? Or the tabernacle. Yeah. And so he does all of this for his lady, the Ark of God. And as part of their extended dialogue, Solomon converts Makeda away from the worship of idols, in particular the sun, moon, and the stars, and to the worship of the one true God. And this being done, she is all prepared to go back to her own lands. But there's a problem. And that's that Solomon is really, really, really into her. Now, as we all know, this is a family show, but as we all know, Solomon is fond of women, let us say.
He's all about the ladies.
All about the ladies. Here, the Kebra Negast makes a little bit of an apology for him. It says that the marriages that he's entered up to at this point in time, now it will go bad later, but up to this point in time, it's not out of a desire for fornication, but rather it's so that he can grow his kingdom according to the wisdom that he had been given. And the Kebra Negast is also very clear that this sort of activity is not acceptable under the law of the Spirit. So would you please read our polygamy disclaimer, Father?
Wow. Now, those early peoples lived under the law of the flesh, for the grace of the Holy Spirit had not been given unto them. And to those who lived after Christ, it was given to live with one woman under the law of marriage. The apostles laid down for them an ordinance, saying, all those who have received his flesh and his blood are brethren. Their mother is the church, and their father is God, and they cry out with Christ, whom they have received, saying, Our Father who art in heaven. For those who believe, the law and the command have been given that they shall not marry many wives, even as Paul saith, those who marry many wives seek their own punishment. He who marrieth one wife hath no sin. And the law restraineth us from the sister-in-law in respect of the bearing of children. and the apostles speak concerning it in the book of Councils. Now, I'm sure that must refer to the apostolic canons. That's got to be what that's about, right? Now we ordain even as did they. We know well what the apostles who were before us spake. We, the 318. So this is back now,
right? Yeah.
Council of Nicaea.
Remember our frame narrative. I love frame narratives.
We, the 318, have maintained and laid down the orthodox faith, our Lord Jesus Christ being with us, and he hath directed us what we should teach and how we should fashion the faith. This kind of strikes me as, it's like how St. John Chrysostom talks about the argument between Saints Peter and Paul, where he has such reverence for them.
Yes.
That he says it must have been the case that Peter and Paul kind of conspired to come up with this together, that they had these meetings in the back. Okay, you guys, we're going to pretend like we're having this big disagreement in order to
in pro
put
wrestling
forth.
Terms, this is what's called a work.
Yeah. And in order to put forth this important doctrine that gets promulgated at the Apostolic Council. Now, I mean, I don't think it's important to say, oh, St. John Chrysostom is saying that's what really happened. Right. But this is the frame that he puts on it because, again, of his reverence. I think modern people too easily poke at holy people in the scriptures.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that that saints don't do anything wrong.
Right.
But we're a little too comfortable with that, I think.
And it's because we have elevated, you could say in the ancient world, they have reverence as a high value. They put a high value on reverence, right? Whereas the thing that we put a high value on is relatability. So this is why people are always saying, and I'm going to be honest, like a little tired of hearing this, that, oh, I just want more relatable saints. Could I have some more saints who are just like me? Well, listen, how do I put this? If you find there are not a lot of saints just like you, that might mean something. Like, it might mean you're not a saint. Like, I don't know how else to say it. Like, I mean, I say this as somebody with a lot of obvious passions and sins. Like, I'm not saying I'm a holy person or anything. I'm saying the saints are holy, and
which saint ever wore a plaid shirt, Richard? Which saint, I ask you, ever wore a plaid shirt?
I do not know of a one, Father Andrew.
Yeah.
I do not know of a one, but
we don't have Marcus Catrudi on today to remind us.
I don't know any saints who had podcasts, so it's
right. Which saint posted his opinions on Twitter? I ask you. I have seen someone.
right, exactly, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the point of writing stories that are high, the point of treating holy people in a high way, is to call us to something higher, not to bring them down, but to lift us up. That's what this whole project of Christianity is, right? It's about bringing us up, and that's why the story is being told this way. It's a disclaimer of sorts, but it's really about reverence for Solomon, who's a saint. It's about reverence for this whole story about the origin story of Ethiopia, right?
Right. And I would just say that certainly in the case of something like, Peter and Paul, what St. John Chrysostom is talking about certainly reflects the eschatological reality, that the fact that the disagreement happened allowed us to kind of answer this important question. And do you think Saints Peter and Paul are like still arguing, before the throne of Christ or something like that? No, they're not, and so, in any case, So the idea is, of course, that Solomon will be led astray by all of his wives. So we're not saying this is a good idea, but that it just hasn't happened yet, right? But he's only going to be led astray by his wives after his true lady, the Ark of Zion, is taken from Jerusalem. So Solomon really wants to take Makeda as his wife. She is unwilling. She's the virgin queen. Actually, to stay queen, she sort of has to remain that. And she doesn't intend to stay here in Jerusalem with him. For lots of reasons. Later on, we get a comparison between Ethiopia and Palestine, basically. And the Ethiopians are like, why would we ever want to live here? Ethiopia is awesome. The weather is better. The hunting is better. The food is better. It's better in every way. You guys live in a desert. Why would we want to stay here? So she doesn't intend to stay in Jerusalem with him, which means that marriage is off the table, but so is anything else. So Solomon tries his best to convince her to stay. So she makes him promise that he will not use his power to take her by force. Okay, which is, if you've read enough ancient literature, this is a real thing to be worried about.
Yes.
And so Solomon prepares a house for her, invites her to dinner, and this is where our hot ones joke pays off. So, it says, and the queen came and passed into a place set apart with splendor and glory. And she sat down immediately behind him, where she could see and learn and know everything. And she marveled exceedingly at what she saw and at what she heard. And she praised the God of Israel in her heart. And she was struck with wonder at the splendor of the royal palace which she saw. For she could see, though no one could see her, even as Solomon had arranged in wisdom for her. He had beautified the palace the place where she was seated, and had spread over it purple hangings. So, by the way, notice that she is veiled in the way that the Ark of the Covenant is veiled in the right?
She's in a what do you call that? A ciborium of sorts.
Yes, exactly. So he'd beautified the place where she was seated and had spread over it purple hangings and laid down carpets and decorated it with miskat and marbles and precious stones. And he burned aromatic powders and sprinkled oil of myrrh and cassia round about, and scattered frankincense and costly incense in all directions. So she's brought into a holy place that's covered with a veil. There's incense, right? It's all the things that you do with the ark. Then they brought her into this. When they brought her into this abode, the odor thereof was very pleasing to her. And even before she ate the dainty meats therein, she was satisfied with the smell of them. So one of those meals that smells so good that you're like, I would just be happy smelling this.
Yeah, but also, right? I mean, this is cultic language too.
Absolutely.
Right? When not that Solomon is worshiping her. He's not. But this is worship language. So, and
there is supposed to be polyvalence or like overlap between Queen of Ethiopia, the Ark, and then of course ultimately the Mother of God.
Yeah. So you've got incense and so forth, but even the idea that she was simply pleased with the smell.
Right. Yes.
I mean, this is how you sacrifice to your God. As God is pleased with the smell, you burn it. I mean, there's all these barbecues like in the Iliad, and the gods are always saying, "Wow, that's so great."
Yes. So with wise intent, Solomon sent to her meats which would make her thirsty. This is a terrible thing to be reading 5th week of Lent. Meats which would make her thirsty, and drinks that were mingled with vinegar, and fish and dishes made with pepper. And this he did, and gave them to the queen to eat. And the royal meal had come to an end 3 times and 7 times. That is, it is a 10-course meal. And the administrators and the counselors and the young men and the servants had departed. And the king rose up, and he went to the queen, and he said unto her, now that they were alone, take thou thine ease here, for love's sake, until daybreak. Let the reader understand. And she said unto him, swear to me by thy God, the God of Israel, that thou wilt not take me by force. For if I, who according to the law of men am a maiden, be seduced, I should travel on my journey back in sorrow and affliction and tribulation. So Solomon swears the oath as requested, but for his part, he also has her swear an oath.
Yeah. So
Solomon, read that.
It says, Solomon answered and said unto her, I swear unto thee that I will not take thee by force, but thou must swear unto me that thou wilt not take by force anything that is in my house. And the queen laughed and said unto him, being a wise man, why dost thou speak as a fool? Shall I steal anything, or shall I carry out of the house of the king that which the king hath not given to me? Oh, this is where the jokes are. Do not imagine that I have come hither through love of riches. Moreover, my own kingdom is as wealthy as thine. There's nothing which I wish for that I lack. Assuredly, I have only come in quest of thy wisdom. Yeah,
so she kind of laughs at him. She makes the oath as requested. But this is where the trickery comes in, because Solomon has instructed his servants to remove all of the water from the palace, except for the water which is kept in the king's own bedchamber.
See, this would be a lot easier if they just had plumbing. You could just hit the big...
Yes, well, they're not Mycenaeans. So as the queen goes to sleep, the effects of the spicy meal which she has eaten begin to trouble her more and more. Until she believes that she is absolutely going to die if she does not get some water. And she's starts wandering through the palace, asking everybody she meets, all the servants, everybody, for a drink of water.
Water, nowhere, and not a drop to drink.
Not a drop to drink. And so finally she's told that the only water to be had is in the king's chamber. You guys see where this is going.
Yeah.
So finally, desperate, she sneaks into Solomon's chamber to take a drink. And this is where he sort of snatches her wrist as she's reaching for the ladle. And Solomon seized her hand before she could drink the water and said unto her, Why hast thou broken the oath that thou hast sworn, that thou wouldst not take by force anything that is in my house? And she answered and said unto him in fear, Is the oath broken by my drinking water? Like, that's a little silly. And then the king says to her, this is like my favorite, it's so clever. Is there anything that thou hast seen under the heavens that is better than water? Which, okay, fair enough. And the queen said, I have sinned against myself, and thou art free from thy oath, but let me drink water for my thirst. Then Solomon said unto her, Am I perchance free from the oath which thou hast made me swear? And the queen said, Be free from thy oath, only let me drink water. And he permitted her to drink water, and after she had drunk water, he worked his will with her, and they slept together. So, this is not a shining moment in the life of Solomon.
Yeah.
It's going to come back to, get him in a really big way, though. And this is why I was pointing out to you the really important parallels between Makeda and the ark. The way that she's, sort of in the holy place, and there's the incense and everything. Yeah. Because he's stealing something from her, right? He's sort of tricked her into the situation in which she can no longer act honorably, right? And it's between two different. It's do I keep my virginity or do I keep my oath, right?
Yeah, and it should be underlined that that trickery in and of itself is not considered. I mean, obviously this has a particular end to it, but trickery in and of itself is not considered in biblical terms to be unethical.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
sometimes that's all you've got. Especially for someone now, this is not applied to Solomon, but for the powerless against the powerful, often trickery is all you've got. It's the only way to make justice come about. And in this case, it's the only way to make this story come about as it is. But as you said, it is going to come back to bite Solomon. So, all
right. So after this bit of trickery, Solomon goes to sleep and he has a dream. And the dream basically foreshadows everything else that's going to come. So in this dream, there's this brilliant sun shining, comes down from heaven, shines over the nation of Israel. But after a while, it leaves shining over Israel and flies all the way to the country of Ethiopia. So Solomon in the dream is waiting to see if the sun will come back to Israel, but it does not return. Instead, after a really long wait, a greater sun appears over Israel in the country of Judah and sends forth a light much stronger than that before. But Israel rebels against this sun and takes up arms against it, attempting to extinguish the light. And so as a result, this casts darkness upon the whole world with earthquake and thick darkness, sort of like maybe you could say happened at the crucifixion, for instance, as the sun is destroyed. And then following this, the sun rises from the tomb that they had put him in under guard. Okay, you guys should be able to figure out what the sun is now, right?
Yes.
And he rises and illumines the whole world, leaving Israel and instead illuminating the first sea. So the sea is associated in Old Testament imagery with the nations, that is with the Gentiles. So it's the first sea, which is, and the last sea, which is Ethiopia and Rome.
Okay.
The ends of the earth. And all of this is obviously a foreshadowing, of course, of the glory of God leaving Israel with the ark, and then the coming of Jesus Christ, who's rejected by his own people, who rises from the dead to bring salvation to the nations. And we should also keep in mind here the image of the woman clothed with the sun in the apocalypse, who's very closely identified with the ark. And here I just have to point out, as I like to sometimes point out to my catechumens, that there's no chapter break. Like the chapter breaks were added a lot later. So you can get to the end of Revelation chapter 11 and then sort of think, now Revelation chapter 12, something totally new is happening. But if you just take the end of 11, the beginning of 12, take them together as though you're seeing the same scene. It says, Then the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings and an earthquake and a great hail, right? Which is a lot of the imagery we just got in the dream. And then there appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, and the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars, and she, being with child, cried, travailing in birth, and pain to be delivered. And of course,
this is what we call the woman of the apocalypse.
Right.
And there is, of course, a big tradition of iconography of depicting the Theotokos in exactly these terms.
Right. And if you read
you
read the church fathers on this, sometimes, especially early ones, will say, some people say this is the Virgin and some people say this is the church. Obviously, yes. Obviously, yes.
Obviously.
Yeah. So there's, anyway, the thing I'm pointing out is that the language for Solomon's dream here is very much in the same kind of a language. And again, it's the ark, the virgin with child. The point is the dwelling of God with men, right? These things coming together. So Solomon gets Queen Makeda pregnant, but she refuses to stay in Jerusalem as his queen. By the way, I just realized I read your quote in the text. I'm sorry about that.
No,
we'll
it's
get
not
back
a quote
on
from
track.
me.
Well, you know what I mean. I put it in blue for Father Andrew to read.
We'll just have to take turns the other way now.
That's right.
I get
that's
red
right.
now.
Yep, that's right. It's okay. The red quotes were the really good ones, though, that I was saving for myself. But anyway.
Oh, well. You did that yourself.
Oh, well.
You tricked
that's
yourself.
Right. That's right. Dang it.
You played yourself, Richard
Too
Rowland.
clever for my own good. So, all right. So Solomon gets Queen Makeda pregnant, but she refuses to stay in Jerusalem as his queen, which is what he really wants. So he finally lets her go. So she returns to her kingdom, to her own people. In the normal course of time, her son Menelik is born.
Yeah.
And Solomon had given Makeda his signet ring and promised her that when her son was full grown, she would send him to him, and so that he could crown her as a king and give him wealth and a great inheritance. And this is
crown the son.
Crown the son. Yeah. And the reason for this is that kingship in the ancient world is something which is bestowed. You are made a king because another king has given you the crown, and then later on in European history, it becomes you're made a king because the emperor has given you that crown, or in Western Europe, past a certain point, because the Pope has given you the crown, so on. But basically, Makeda. Remember that the law of the land of Ethiopia up to this point has been Ethiopia is ruled by a virgin queen.
Virgin queen.
So she can't bestow kingship in that way. It's got to come from Solomon. So the idea is Solomon says, well, whenever your son is old enough, send him back to me. I'll crown him king. I'll give him an inheritance. I'll give him great wealth, etc.
Yeah. So it's not the idea that Solomon is saying, this is my heir, and he is now king in Jerusalem.
Well, that is going to happen.
Yeah.
Because Solomon,
at this point,
at least at this point, that's not the idea. Now, Solomon, again, Solomon is the kind of guy, when he sees something really great, he's like, you know where that should stay? Here.
I name it unto myself.
Yes, I must have it. It must be for my collection, kind of a thing, right?
I mean, Solomon as the villain in a Bond movie is not what I really was imagining when we started this episode today. But he's tapping his fingertips together.
Yeah. I mean that's just sort of it's also, you could say, like the impulse, and this impulse can work out in positive ways or negative ways. That maybe somebody in your life has, like members of your family who, like, the thing they want is just to always have the whole family together, always in one place. Sure. They want to have, like, all the best things. But it's just the impulse to say, we want all the best people and all the best stuff. We want it here with us,
Yeah. I mean, I wish everybody that I love and like and so forth would live in my town.
Yes. Exactly. I mean, it would be great if I could have all my favorite, I'm a person like this. Like, I want to have all my favorite people together in one place. Like, there's nothing I enjoy. Like, there's really no better feeling in the world than that, right? And so that will happen with Solomon, who by this point has had another son finally. So when Menelik gets to Israel, when he gets old enough to start wondering about who his father is, the queen decides it's time to send him to Solomon. And so Menelik gets to Israel. And basically, as soon as he shows up, everyone immediately recognizes him as Solomon's son. In fact, the resemblance is so strong that many people initially mistaken him either for Solomon or for David come back from the dead. That's what Solomon says. He's like, you look even more like my father than I do.
Wow.
Right? And in fact, when Menelik is crowned, he'll be crowned as King David II. So we'll come back to that. So there's a lot of back and forth, and there's a lot of interplay here between the idea of image and likeness, right? That Solomon is sort of in the image of his father David, but Menelik is both the image and the likeness. So he's kind of an improvement in certain ways.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of back and forth here, a lot of interesting details. But when Solomon finally meets his son, right, he immediately recognizes him as his own. Like, and he says it's like David has come back from the dead. And so it's important to note also that although Solomon has taken many wives and concubines before the queen, Menelik is the first son that he got. There's to say he's his first begotten son, not his only begotten son, because Rehoboam has been born by now. But
that guy.
But also this idea that Makeda, the Queen of Ethiopia, was really like she was the one that got away. Like Solomon has really not loved any other women since her. She was the one that got away.
Sort
she was
of
the
doing
only
his
one.
royal duty or whatever.
Yeah, just going through the motions now. Poor guy.
With all those wives.
With all those wives.
Yeah.
All right. So when Solomon sees Menelik, which is I think how you say that, it's Menelik, he decides that he's not going to keep his promise to the queen, which was I'll make him king and send him back. Instead,
Send him home.
I'm going to make him my heir. He'll be the king of Israel, the king of Jerusalem, rather than the king of Ethiopia. So why don't you go ahead and read this next quote?
Yeah, so this is Solomon's explanation for this. Besides travailing with him and suckling him, what else hath a woman to do with a son?
Just the... I love this line so much. Like, it's got to be intentionally funny. There's no way.
I know. I know.
Yeah, other than, just the pregnancy and the labor and the raising and the weaning, like, what do women have to do with bearing a son? I mean,
okay, he goes on. He goes, a daughter belongeth to the mother and a boy to the father. God cursed Eve, saying, bring forth children in anguish and with sorrow of heart, and after thy bringing forth shall take place thy return to thy husband. With an oath he said, bring forth, and having sworn, thy return to thy husband shall follow. As for this my son, I will not give him to the queen, but I will make him king over Israel. For this is my firstborn, the first of my race, whom God hath given me. Yeah.
I mean, needless to say, this does not go this way for Solomon. So, for a variety of reasons. The main reason this doesn't work, though, is because Menelik's will is just as strong as his. Menelik does not roll over for anybody. And so...
My will is as strong as yours, and my kingdom is great. You have no power over me?
Yes, one might say. So Menelik's will is as strong as his father's. He refuses to stay in Israel. For one thing, he already misses home. As we've mentioned, the hunting is better, the weather is better.
Yeah.
We're just as wealthy there, etc. Another thing is that he sees that Rehoboam is Solomon's legal son. That is, he's the firstborn son by a woman that Solomon had as a wife. Menelik is not a legitimate heir in that sense.
Yeah.
And he sees, because he's wise, he has sort of like combined wisdom now, of both Solomon and Makeda. He sees that if he stays, there's going to be trouble. So Solomon,
where should I go?
So Solomon,
if I stay, there would be trouble. If I go there,
I know that song, but only because I heard it as an adult. Because again, that's rock music. I would not have been allowed to listen to it as a kid. But anyway, so finally Solomon breaks out his big guns and he says, "Listen, you should stay with me in Jerusalem because Our Lady Zion is here. Where else would be better for you to stay than where the glory of God dwells?" As far as this goes, Menelik says, well, God can actually bless me anywhere. And, but also he's been instructed by his mother to ask for the fringe of the covering of the ark. So this is associated with, so the ark has just has a cloth that usually covers it. And it's a fringed cloth. We use a lot of things like this in the Orthodox Church for various kinds of covering. And what she asked for is basically cut the fringe off and give it and bring it back as a relic so that I can have it here and venerate it and think about the ark. And this has to do with a lot of things that somehow we do not have time to get into about the way that Ethiopia is associated with the wings, it's associated with fringe, it's associated with a nest, basically the gathering of remnants of things, which is why that's where the ark goes. The gathering of remnants of things to basically create a protective container for the holy, right? And so like the veil, the fringe, the nest, the wings, all of those different things in the scriptural language around Ethiopia. And if people want to know a little more about this, it's the main thing that Jonathan Pajot and I talked about in the first video that we did on Ethiopia like 3 years ago. But basically we have like an extensive biblical, basically every time Ethiopia is mentioned in the Bible and how it kind of gathers all of the symbolism into it. So I'm going to refer people to that only because we still have a lot to cover. But she asked for the fringe, basically the fringe of the covering of the ark. And we should also think about, the woman who just wanted to touch the fringe of Christ's garment, which is associated with the prophecy that the Messiah would come with healing in his wings. But maybe a better translation is actually healing in the fringe of his garment. In any case, all these things kind of go together. And so finally convinced by, and and here's the thing, Menelik has taken this oath, but he has taken it by his mother's breasts, which is, in this culture, is one of the most solemn oaths you can possibly take. Nowadays, we would say, I swear on my mother's grave. I don't know which one is better or worse. It's not the point. But he's taken this oath. So he's finally like, listen, I've sworn this oath on my mother's breast that I'm going to bring the fringe back and I'm coming back to Ethiopia. And Solomon says, fine, okay. So he says, I'm not just going to give you the fringe of the ark's covering. I'm going to give you the whole covering itself. And then he just has a new one made. So this being done, Solomon gathers all of the nobles of his kingdom together. And Solomon being this kind of a guy says, listen, if I have to send back my firstborn son, guess what you guys have to do too. And so Solomon the king, and notice here, by the way, how this is sort of a reverse Exodus. Okay. So Solomon the king went back to his house, and he caused to be gathered together his counselors and his officers and the elders of his kingdom, and said unto them, this includes the high priest, by the way, I am not able to make this young man consent to dwell here, and now hearken unto me, and to what I shall say unto you. Come, let us make him king of the country of Ethiopia, together with your children. Ye sit on my right hand and on my left hand, and in like manner the eldest of your children shall sit on his right hand and on his left hand. Come, O ye counselors and officers, let us give him your firstborn children, and we shall have 2 kingdoms. I will rule here with you, and our children shall reign there. Okay. And after this, by the way, we get a sort of a cryptic comment, which will be taken up later in the Kebra Negast, about how the king of Rome has also asked that Solomon would take his daughter to wife. And this is a way to then connect also the Caesars to the Davidic line. So we will not get a chance to get into that further today, but just by the way.
Just throwing that out there.
Yep. So Menelik is then crowned by Zadok the priest, because it's the priest who has to anoint you, or actually chrismate you as king, right? So he's crowned by Zadok the priest as David II. He's given a version of the Torah, which is the law of the Ethiopian people, and it's basically reiterated. There's an extensive part of the Torah which is just kind of repeated in the middle of the Kebra Negast, and this becomes basically the law of the Ethiopian people.
I assume this is where he gives them jubilees and Enoch and that kind of thing as well.
One would assume, but I mean, this sort of accounts for. I mean, we have to remember that there really is, in whatever historical archaeological way you care about, there is a there was and continues to be a Jewish the Beit Israel, like the
Ethiopian Judaism.
Ethiopian Judaism, which people always sort of forget as part of the whole kind of story of ancient Judaism.
Yeah.
And it also accounts for why when the Ethiopians converted to Christianity, they retained certain aspects of the Torah, because they were converting as basically, as far as they saw themselves, like as sort of the true Judaism.
Yeah.
To Christianity all at once. And so, so they get the laws of the Ethiopian people, especially those concerning the kings, what kings should be, how they should be honored by their people, the 10 words or the 10 commandments, and then this is sort of the mythical basis for all of this stuff that we've been talking about. So, at this point, you think, all right, happy ending, everything's fine. Solomon and all the firstborn sons, they're going to go back to Ethiopia. But it turns out they're pretty upset about being chosen for a thing they did not ask to do, which is to leave their homeland and go back to Ethiopia.
Yeah.
But what troubles them most is not their exile. It is the thought of leaving behind Our Lady Zion, the tabernacle of the law of God.
Oh.
And so, Azarias...
How can we sing the Lord's song in a strange land?
How can we sing this? But what if it weren't a strange land, though? Aha. And this is where we get a plan so cunning, you could put a tail on it and call it a fox. And that is... a little Blackadder for the audience there. That is that Azarias, the son of Zadok the high priest, comes up with a plan. If we're going to leave, we're not going empty-handed. And he puts together a plot, binds his companions with an oath of secrecy, and reveals to them his plan. They're going to commission a craftsman to build a replica ark, identical in size and form, but obviously not the ark, because it's not built by Moses. It's not made, with like the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, etc. And then in the stillness of the night, they're going to do a little ark swap. They're going to take the true tabernacle from the Holy of Holies and put the false one in its place.
This is just like at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, except, in that case, it's just a bag of sand or whatever.
Yes. That's exactly what they're doing, though. They're going...
The old switcheroo.
So they gather 140 double drachmas, however much money that is. They hire a carpenter to fashion the box. And in the Arabic tradition, when the Menelik is actually overseeing this, although in the Kebra Negast he doesn't know what's happening yet, and they hire a carpenter to oversee the work, and then when he's done, they kill him because, of course, the dead tell no tales. That's not in the Kebra Negast. That's in the later Arab retelling, but it's a fun detail.
A little deeper.
Yeah. So that night, there's also like weird stuff in there about like the ark sort of flies up in the air every day when everybody comes to pray. And then, so when the fake one doesn't do that, that's how they know the jig is up. But in any case,
yours doesn't do that?
What's that? Yeah.
Your altar doesn't do that?
Yeah. So, again, that's not in the Kebra Negast. That's just like later retellings. So that night, as all these things are being set in motion, Azarias receives a vision from the Lord. And in this vision, the voice of the Lord speaks to him and says, before you depart for Ethiopia, let Menelik offer up a sacrifice. And when the time comes, let the tabernacle, that is the ark, be carried out from the Holy of Holies into the light of day. Why don't you read this next one?
Okay. And while Azarias was asleep at night, the angel of the Lord appeared unto him and said unto him, take to thee 4 goats, each a yearling. Now they shall be for your sins, thyself, and Elmaeus, and Abis, and Makri, and 4 pure sheep, yearlings also, and an ox whereon no yoke hath ever been laid. And thou shalt offer up the ox as a sacrifice on the east side of her, that is, Zion, and the sheep and the goats to the right and left thereof, and at the west of it, which is close to its exit. And your Lord David shall speak to Solomon the king, and shall say unto him, one thing I ask from thee, O Father, I would offer up a sacrifice to the holy city Jerusalem, and to my lady Zion, the holy and heavenly tabernacle of the law of God. And Solomon shall say unto him, do so. And David shall say unto him, let the son of the priest offer up sacrifice on my behalf, even as he knoweth. And he will give thee the command, and thou shalt offer up the sacrifice. And thou shalt bring forth the tabernacle of the law of God after thou hast offered up the sacrifice, and I will again show thee what thou shalt do in respect of it as to bringing it out, for this is from God. For Israel hath provoked God to wrath, and for this reason he will make the tabernacle of the law of God to depart from him. I mean, it's worth... So obviously the point here is that God is the one who ordains this switcheroo. Right. But also, I mean, I don't know if this is in the text, but it says that Israel has provoked God to wrath. Solomon oversaw a whole lot of idolatry being imported into Israel. Like,
so that hasn't happened yet in the story.
Okay.
I like where your head is at, but we don't actually know, or at least it's not clear to me from the text.
What has happened? That is the wrath.
Yeah, in what way? Because the idolatry thing is actually covered in the Kebra Negast, and it's very weird.
Is it the idea that with the ark gone, now they're going to worship other gods because there's a sort of vacuum.
It's Solomon gets the old switcheroo done on him, and he sort of gets tricked into doing some idolatry, and then decides, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, and kind of goes all in on. So it's really kind of fun. I'll try to at least summarize it at the end. Kind of fun. That's a wrong way to say that. It's interesting, and it's very weird. Like, as modern people, we still don't totally know what's being described. But I'll give my best guess at it. So anyway, yeah. So we're not exactly clear how Israel has provoked God to wrath. But it seems that, I think it's, just a sort of a matter of, all the prosperity, life is really good. People start forgetting God. But the Kebra Negast doesn't really tell us at this point what the thing is that has caused them to kind of fall out of God's favor. But the next morning, Menelik, Azarias tells Menelik, we got to make a sacrifice before the trip. And Solomon says, yeah, that sounds great. He gives them the animals himself. And then after the offering is made, the angel of the Lord descends upon the temple. And with the keys in his hands, that is, the angel of the Lord, with the keys in his hands, throws open the doors of the sanctuary, commands Azarias to bring in the false ark. And so with divine help, Azarias, Elimeas, Abiesa, and Makari carry the true tabernacle of Zion out of the temple and into Azarias' house. And then by the same path, again with the help of the angel, so nobody sees what they're doing, they replace the false ark in the stead, and the angel locks the sanctuary behind them. And Menelik did not know, and I actually have this wrong in the notes. It was just a typo. Menelik at this point doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know this is going on. But having received the blessing from his father Solomon, he departs forever from the land of his, well, not his birth, but his conceiving.
Yeah.
And the next day, before the first light of dawn, Azarias and his companions load the tabernacle of Zion onto a wagon, which doesn't usually go well, but in this case, it works out.
Yeah, you're supposed to carry it on poles.
Supposed to carry it on poles.
That's the rules.
Yeah. Yes, but there are sort of like there's some technically carried things, like there's some details in the text and in some of the later legends as well about, well, only Levites can move this, so we got to get some Levites to move the baggage without knowing what they're carrying, and those kinds of things go on. It's kind of fun.
Interesting.
But in any case, they conceal it beneath baggage, ropes, cloth, right? Anything, because it's like there's so much glory, it's shining out, so they just have to pile stuff on. And then in the dead of night, they flee Jerusalem. But that night, Jerusalem does not sleep. Instead, the streets are filled with the cries of men, the wailing of women, the howling of dogs, the shrieks of donkeys. And the old men wailed, and the children cried out, and the widows wept, and the virgins lamented, because the sons of their nobles, the mighty men of Israel, had risen up to depart. But the city did not weep for them alone, but because the majesty of the city had been carried off with them. And although they did not know exactly that Zion had been taken from them, they made no mistake in their hearts, and they wept bitterly. And they were then even as they were when God slew the firstborn of Egypt.
Wow.
So it's a reverse Exodus.
Yeah.
There was not a house wherein there was not wailing, from man even to the beast. The dogs howled, and the asses screamed, and all those who were left there mingled their tears together. It was as though the generals of a mighty army had besieged the great city and had captured it by assault and looted it and taken its people prisoners and slain them with the edge of the sword. Even thus was that city of Zion, Jerusalem.
Man, I wish we had like a sound effect we could play right now of a donkey shriek.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Donkey shrieks. I don't even know what that sounds like.
I mean, we would just say braying, but I mean, if you've ever heard like a really scared or really upset donkey, like you'll understand. I've had more experience with donkeys than I care to have had. There are two animals which I will have no further dealings with if possible. Donkeys are one, goats are the other.
Oh.
So
my wife always says the goats are the cutest of all kinds of domesticated animals.
I don't want to argue with your wife for various reasons. From afar, they're very cute. I think anybody who's ever kept goats like knows that there's a reason the devil is depicted as a goat.
I mean, they're very self-willed, that's for sure. You know, the sheep and the goats thing.
Exactly.
Yeah. Donkey shrieks. Okay.
So
I want that to be like a new running
shrieks.
Gag. Yeah, donkey shrieks. Donkey shrieks.
.tumblr.com. So Solomon... Sorry. Oh, boy. All right, so Solomon's heart is troubled.
To say the least.
To say the least. Because of all the shrieking donkeys. And
I mean, that would trouble the heart of any king.
For sure. Yeah, and so he summons the high priest Zadok and commands him, go into the Holy of Holies, bring forth the covering of the tabernacle, take the new covering that I have prepared and place it in its stead. Because remember, he's supposed to have sent this covering off, and I think he just sort of woke up and remembered, like, oh, I forgot to give him this.
Oh,
so Zadok,
hey guys, don't forget your relic.
Yeah,
it's okay.
Right,
we
exactly.
took the whole body.
Exactly. And so, so the wagons are loaded. Menelik and his companions set out on their journey, but they do not walk the road alone, because the Kebra Negast says that the archangel Michael goes before them, cutting a path through the wilderness and shielding them from the scorching heat of the sun. The sun will not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. And so great is the favor of the Lord upon them that neither man nor beast touched the earth as they traveled.
Oh, levitation.
The very ground fell away beneath their feet, and they moved as swift as the bat and the eagle carried forward on the wings of the wind. So even the wheels of the wagons did not graze the dust. Zion has departed from Jerusalem, and now a new Jerusalem is rising in the land of Ethiopia.
Yeah, it's like the whole second and third Rome thing, but the suggestion is that in some way this is the new Jerusalem.
I mean, it's not even a suggestion; it's outright stated in the Kebra Negast. Like, it's not even a little ambiguous. And so obviously we know there's certain things that have to happen when you move the ark, and one of the things that has to happen is that someone dances. So, you want to read this next passage?
Yeah.
So this is after at some point, during the journey, Menelik is like, man, we are making surprisingly good time, and also my feet are touching the ground. What is going on?
Yeah.
And that's when
I feel a little boogie coming on.
Right.
You guys, like a little, arc snatching cha-cha.
Yes. What is the strange beat that is no? Forgive me. I'm sorry. So
you want me to read about the ark snatching cha-cha?
Yeah. So David, that is David II. Remember that he's David again, right?
David
he dances.
Yeah. Okay. So it says this in the text. And King David rose up and skipped about like a young sheep, and like a kid of the goats. Hey, see, goats that hath sucked milk in abundance from his mother.
Baby goats are cute, obviously. Even as his grandfather David rejoiced before the tabernacle of the law of God. He smote the ground with his feet and rejoiced. Oh, this is clear that he's doing Debki. And rejoiced in his heart and uttered cries of joy with his mouth. And what shall I say of the great joy and gladness that were in the camp of the king of Ethiopia? One man told his neighbor, and they smote the ground with their feet like young bulls. This is definitely Debki. And they clapped their hands together and marveled. And there's a guy at the end of the line who's swinging a handkerchief. But also an old fiddler named Seamus for whatever reason. So this is what Martin Shaw says. Dr. Martin Shaw says that at every wedding in history, across all of time and space, there's always been an old Irish fiddler named Seamus. And I feel like, there's no way to argue with that. You can't disprove it.
Okay. And they clapped their hands together and marveled and stretched out their hands to heaven, and they cast themselves down with their faces to the ground, and they give thanks unto God in their hearts. And there it is. The ark snatching Debki. We're going to... It's not a child.
Yeah, that's good.
The ark snatching Debki.
Yeah, and so another important idol, as we're kind of running out of time here, but another important detail is another thing happens when the ark enters your town, which is that all the idols fall down. And so as it passes through the land of Egypt, the idols of Egypt fall down. And this is meant to parallel both moments from Exodus as well as Judges, as well as the events that transpired according to our tradition when Christ as an infant, and by the way, this is a line in the Akathist hymn, Christ as an infant when he was brought by his parents to sojourn in the land of Egypt. So this is what it says in the Kebra Negast. And those who saw them said concerning them, these having once been creatures of earth have become beings of heaven. Who then is wiser than Solomon the king of Judah? But he never traveled in this wise in a wagon of the winds.
Nice.
And those who were in the it's so great, wagon of the winds. Man, that's
Probably
my new
doesn't
fantasy.
alliterate in the original.
My new fantasy trilogy.
But,
doesn't matter. Wagon of the winds. My new fantasy trilogy.
I have a prog rock band named for that.
Yeah, for sure. And those who were in the cities and towns were witnesses that when these men came into the land of Egypt, our gods and the gods of the king fell down and were dashed in pieces, and the towers of the idols were likewise broken into fragments. And they asked the priests of the gods, the diviners of Egypt, the reason why our gods had fallen down. And they said unto us, the tabernacle of the God of Israel, which came down from heaven, is with them, and will abide in their country forever. So at this point, almost exactly 90 minutes into the show, part 2 of 2, we've covered roughly half of the Kebra Negast. And my thought is, at some point in the future, not next episode, but at some point in the future, we'll come back and do the rest. Let me just kind of give a teaser of the things that people can expect, and then we'll go to the chat. So if people have questions, comments, etc., you want to put in the chat. Offensive puns. I mean, not that, you know what I mean. Not offensive puns.
There are some fun things in the chat. So
so we'll go to the chat. But just as there's obviously Solomon's anger when he figures out what's going on, and he sort of moves through the stages of grief. Starts with anger, and then denial, and then
not
acceptance.
Just the river in Egypt, where
not just the river in Egypt.
Down.
But weeping for the ark. Eventually, he accepts that this is God's will, and this is when he is then. Speaking of denial, this is when he is actually seduced by the princess of Egypt, and she tricks him into, it seems like, killing locusts in a certain ritual way. It's one of those things that's not very clear at all. I think we would have to know more than we do about ancient Egyptian paganism, but she basically tricks him into worshiping her gods, and then at this point he says, well, in for a penny, in for a pound, the ark has abandoned me, and falls into idolatry, although he does repent at the end of his life.
That's why he's a saint.
And
not because he was a good king.
Right. And in fact, the Kebra Negast goes on a kind of a long apologia for Solomon as saint, in showing us the ways in which he functions as a type of Christ despite his sin.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't cut the legs out from underneath the father of your founding figure.
Right, of course.
That is not what you do.
Yeah, it's not what you do.
But the other thing I wanted to mention, though, right? Like you said, we probably would need to know more about ancient Egyptian paganism. What I think we would probably need to know more about is the way that medieval Ethiopians saw ancient Egyptian paganism, because they're the ones writing this story.
Yeah,
which reminds me, I think isn't it one of the church fathers that says that the ancient Egyptians worshipped onions?
Right.
Like that is a thing, and I don't know
this.
But it's a thing that people said. Clearly.
This seems to be something really old that maybe even the monk Isaac, who's putting the Kebra Negast together, does not know what he's describing.
Maybe he doesn't.
And so that's part of what makes it so difficult.
Okay.
But so the ways in which Solomon functions as a type of Christ, and then right in the middle we get a retelling of the Syrian Book of the Pearl. I don't know if you're familiar with this text. It's so interesting and beautiful, and it's sort of it's a way of describing the way that Mary is the culmination of the human race, basically. And it starts with this idea that there's like a pearl inside of Adam that is then passed on through Seth and through the whole line of the righteous, but the pearl is Mary. And then
interesting.
And so it's a kind of a and this is the sort of justification for calling everybody in the line of Christ righteous, even though many of them were not, just not, like Judah, for instance, who certainly counted among the righteous. I'm not arguing that. But I mean, if you look at the life of Judah in Genesis, he's far from exemplary in certain respects.
Sure.
But the point is that it's I don't really want to. Okay, I mean, I don't care. This may upset the Roman Catholics listening to this if they're listening to this, but it's like an anti or a reverse Immaculate Conception. So instead of the idea that Mary is shielded from the rest of the human race and like ancestral sin, it's more like Mary, like bringing Mary into the world so that Christ can come into the world. Right? I always tell my catechumens, like, God loved you so much, he made Mary so that he could come into the world, right? She's the necessary person for that to happen. And that this action is so great and it's so important that it sort of retroactively redeems everyone that was involved in the process. So that's kind of the idea of the pearl.
Okay.
It's quite interesting, and I think very beautiful. It's very poetic. There's not a literal pearl, obviously, but it's just a really beautiful poetic way of thinking about this. We get the continuing story of the kings of Judah. We get the secret histories of various kingdoms, including, I know you're all really interested in this, the lineage of Samson. The lineage of Samson and all the things that the kings that come from Samson. There's the narrative of the conversion of Ethiopia kind of picks up again, and then basically we get several long chapters of scriptural typology, and basically showing how all these different passages, these types and symbols and characters and figures in the Old Testament are actually typologically concerned with the coming of Christ, with the person of Mary as the Theotokos, and so on. It's really beautiful. I reread it right at the start of the fast as I was preparing the script for these episodes, and I just found it like just a really wonderful meditation, a great way to kind of focus on the right things coming into Lent and Annunciation and Pascha and everything else. And so those chapters are really beautiful, and they're very much, I think, a good case study in just the way that the ancient church reads and understands. They're very sort of like baseline patristic interpretation, but beautifully presented. So at some point we'll come back to the rest of this. Like I said, this is 2 episodes, and we're only halfway through. So
yeah. But this is our final in this series.
Yeah, final in the series. We're going to go somewhere totally different next episode. Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah. So, all right. Well, let's check in with y'all and see what's going on here. So, yes, I think one of your local friends is Nathaniel Masters local to you.
He is, in fact, one of my godsons.
Okay, well, there you go. So he says that you not only read all the weird news, but everyone else sends it to you. So you don't even have to check in on it yourself.
That is all true. Yeah.
That's nice. That's convenient. Yeah. Let's see what else. Oh yeah. I mean, he also asks, like, how do we know that the psychic wasn't predicting the plot of Indiana Jones, Raiders of the Lost Ark? Well, that's because the project was actually after that movie came out. The movie came out in the early, I can't remember what year it was, but I feel like it was like 1982 maybe. There's 81. Okay. Yeah, I was pretty close. Yeah. I mean, I would have been 6 years old. This is also, PR. So this is pre-Richard, in terms of our dating of the, of history here. Dutch Lane mentions, I was just starting God's revelation of the human heart. Isn't that one of Father Seraphim Rose's texts? And he says that the story of St. Nikitas definitely seems to have some demon-assisted remote viewing.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, people were playing around with this stuff a lot at that particular time in history.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. Let's see what else. What strikes your eye there, Richard, as we go through? I see someone, Harry Garris says, it seems like a lot of modern scholars seem to think that the land of Sheba was in the southern Arabian Peninsula instead of Ethiopia. Yeah. I don't know why they think that. I mean, have you looked into this? You must.
I have looked into it. It's got to do with a few different things. It's sort of like, does Sheba mean Sabaeans? or does it mean the South? Like the word Sheba could mean a few different things.
Yeah, I guess it's Queen of the South in many.
Right.
Yeah.
So the tradition is that it's Ethiopia. I mean, that's the most kind of ancient tradition about it. Obviously, wasn't called Ethiopia at the time. Would have been called Aksum or something like that. But
yeah, I mean, Ethiopia, at least in the Roman period, Ethiopia refers to that whole continent.
It's the Greek name for it's basically originally it's the Greek name for
because
the South, like
because the name
Africa.
Like the word I think doesn't mean something like dark face or burned face,
and it's
referring to the fact that people in that part of the world are dark skinned.
And it means Ethiopia, but it also means like India, and like, and it's part of that is because like that's how the trade route went. Like things from India passed through Ethiopia before they made it to the Mediterranean. Like that was the trade route. So
yeah.
I mean, modern people like to say, oh, maybe it's this. I'm just not super interested in those kinds of arguments for the purposes of reading the Kebra Negast. It's not the point. Some people say, well, maybe it's the Sabaeans, and there is, but then even when you get into arguing about that, some people say, there are like religious similarities between Sabaeans and like pre-Hebraic Ethiopia, and anyway, you can kind of go down the rabbit hole on this, but the tradition is that it's Ethiopia, and it's probably just for purposes of understanding the Kebra Negast, it's not important.
Right. I mean, these things, like, they're interesting questions for sure.
Yeah.
But if the
I'm
point
not saying I'm uninterested in them, but
but if
for purposes of what we're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Like, but if the point is to try to understand this story, breaking that association doesn't help us understand this story.
I mean, it's a good time to just mention kind of what at least I really think our methodology is, which is not like when we read these stories, it's to explain why the story is important to the people who told it, to the people who kept retelling it. Otherwise, it would not have survived to this day. And assuming that these people are not, just stupid idiots and fools, and, like that this story meant something to them and it was worth passing on for a reason. And so then to try to enter into that and to, as honestly as we can, just try to enter into that and tell the story and just kind of communicate it as they would have recognized it.
This is what history is in the pre-modern sense.
Yeah, and this certainly, it's what I'm mainly interested in doing. I'm not, there is a certain kind of historian or linguist who likes to sort of, I don't know, like Neil deGrasse Tyson everything. And anytime you come across any kind of a reference to something, you say, oh, well, traditionally they said this was this, but actually it's this. And you just do that for everything all the time. Now, sometimes it's true, but as an approach, I think it's just not an interesting one to take. I mean, I don't think it's a good approach. I think that if you believe that ancient stories may contain wisdom, which I do, then it's the wrong approach to take. So
yeah. It's like, I mean, you mentioned God help us for our names ever becoming a verb. But you mentioned Neil deGrasse Tyson, right? I remember I saw one of his posts. He said something like, January 1st is astronomically completely unimportant.
Yeah.
It's like, well, miss the point, buddy.
Nobody said it. And by the way, January the 1st is like the Roman civil calendar New Year. In England, the New Year in the Middle Ages was the Annunciation.
Yeah, March 25th.
Which is also the vernal equinox. So like there's lots of New Year's days. Like there's lots of ways you can determine the new year, and
exactly.
Just the wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You had an interesting exchange with Nathaniel about Moses having a beard. So Nathaniel says, I believe this is why Moses is depicted without a beard in iconography, because he's a magician. And they're associated with youthfulness. This is what I've heard anyway.
That's right.
What?
So you'll notice, I hadn't
heard that before, actually.
In our iconographic tradition, there are certain figures, usually Moses, Solomon, Daniel, the three holy youths, and we'll depict them as being young men, beardless, and they'll have like a kind of funny little hat, it's like a version of the Phrygian cap.
Oh, I've heard another explanation for that hat, but go ahead.
Well, the hat is associated with a lot of different things. The hat is not so much that's associated with being like a court official. Basically, it's like it's a variation of the Phrygian cap.
I've had it now. I don't know if this is true because I'm not an iconographer, but I've had it said that this is a stylized version of the phylactery. You know, that they would wear these little boxes. I don't know if that's a later development or whatever. I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I think that it's I personally think it's a variant on the Phrygian cap. If you look at, because you find it in art that's obviously not depicting somebody who's Jewish.
Okay.
So that's sort of my guess, but you know, somebody out there who knows more than I do can correct me. The point is that they're depicted young and beardless, like Moses is usually depicted young and beardless, and it does have to do with this kind of I don't know how to say it, like a sort of a connection. It's a connection with the Magi, right? It's a connection with we think of somebody as wise, as old and bearded, which is also in the tradition, but the idea in the ancient world is like not aging would be a sign of magical powers, basically.
Yeah.
And that seems to have kind of influenced our artistic tradition. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, that's just it's got something to do with that. Certainly, Solomon and Moses both have very strong and pretty old traditions of, you know, kind of like magical lore associated with them. Yeah. And in fact, in one of the ones that I covered in the Ethiopia series that I did with Pajot, there's this the story that when Moses went and conquered the Ethiopians, which is the very ancient tradition behind the opening scene of the Ten Commandments, where there's that big festal triumph, and you know, Moses comes in with the queen of the Ethiopians whom he has subdued, and there's very strong subtext that Moses and her had a thing, you know, like in the movie. Anyway, but that's all in the tradition. And that the idea that that's Moses's first wife or something like that, and there is like a kind of a fairy tale version of the story in which she gave him this magic ring, and using the magic ring is like sort of how Moses, you know, survived so many things. Anyway, it's all, you know, there's a lot more. If people want to know about that, you can go watch that first Ethiopia video I did with Pajot.
Yeah. So also, okay, so Robert Mansfield comments on the whole thing about you know, tricking the queen with spicy. He says, "I do not believe that an empress who rules over the very lands where Indian pepper and spices are imported to could be fooled in this way."
I understand your skepticism, Robert. I would encourage you to think about it in another way, which is maybe Ethiopians developed a taste for spicy food after this encounter. Who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, you go to your local Ethiopian restaurant.
Right. Yeah. You'll find out.
Which I highly recommend, by the way, everybody.
Which I do recommend.
Oh, here's a really fun thing.
This is fun.
Yeah. Read this one.
Samuel Struth says, today is the birthday of Empress Minen Asfoa. Sorry if I said that wrong. Wife of the Emperor Haile Selassie, the first and the last empress of Ethiopia. She was descended from Queen Makeda. Well, memory eternal.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty cool.
It's pretty cool. Yeah.
Little did we know.
There's all kinds of crazy, interesting stuff out there about Haile Selassie and his family and all that stuff. I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a ton of things.
It turns out that someone invented a whole religion around him.
Yes.
He wasn't a part of.
Which he was not a fan of. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So someone who very believably has the name John Anon. Says, so is there good evidence that the Ark of the Covenant is still in Ethiopia? What is, Orthodox perspectives? ?
I mean, what's your measure of good evidence? The Ethiopians say that they've had it. They've always said that they have it, and nobody else has it. So,
and you can't go look at it. It's a funny thing. Like sometimes we're like, well, why won't you let anybody look at it? Like, prove it.
Right,
and,
right.
And they super don't care about proving it.
Super do not care.
It's like, I mean, we don't want you to die. Haven't you seen Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Now, I have been told, I've never been in the altar of an Ethiopian church, but I've been told that they have like a little tabernacle in the shape of an ark. Like
yes. Actually, Samuel mentions this in a subsequent comment. He says the original Ark of the Covenant is kept in Our Lady Mariam of Zion Church in Aksum,
Right.
ancient capital of Ethiopia. Every Ethiopian Orthodox church has a replica of the Ark called a tablet. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it, but
which is like tavot. It means tabernacle.
Which they carry around, around in processions and this sort of stuff.
So, listen, I think the fact that the Ethiopian faith, both before and after their conversion to Christianity, has so deeply and strongly identified with the Ark, whereas that's obviously there in the early, within early Judaism, and then kind of goes away, and it becomes less about the Ark and more about the Torah. I think that and I know I just made some broad sweeping statements, so Father Stephen DeYoung can come at me or whatever, but
just don't mention his name 3 times.
Yeah,
shows up then he's like Beetlejuice.
But the it's like who?
Beetlejuice.
Sorry, I didn't hear that. One more time.
No.
Dang it. Almost. But that's the. I mean, I definitely. I mean, if you ask me personally, do I think they have it? I would just say yes. I mean, I don't see any reason to not credit it. But the point is that these kinds of so let me give you kind of another way of thinking about this. So we watched Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade with the kids, and my oldest son, who's 8, he's like, so is that true about the Holy Grail? And I was like, well, what do you mean? He's like, well, where is it? And I said, it's in church. You've eaten and drunk from the Grail, right?
Yeah, you've achieved the quest of the Grail, son.
You've been fed from the Grail, because what is the Grail? The Grail is the chalice that holds the body and blood of Christ, right? That's really what the Grail is. And so I said, here's a story about the Grail that shows why it might be important or significant, etc. We can decide, how much we like the story, don't like the story. But the point is that the Eucharist is the very body and blood of Christ, and that the Grail is the thing that holds that, and that's why it's sacred. And that the whole idea that you're going to be healed or that you're going to receive eternal life if you drink from this cup is absolutely what we believe as Orthodox Christians. We believe that because we eat and drink his body and drink his blood, as he commanded us, then as he promised, he will raise us up on the last day. It's the medicine of immortality. It's for the healing of soul and body, etc.
Yeah.
And so, in a kind of a similar sense, the thing that you need to understand is that the Ark of God is the Theotokos.
Yeah.
Right? She's the real Ark. She's the real heavenly tabernacle. She's the real, why? Because she carried God within her, just like the chalice, right?
And the altar at church is the Ark,
right? Is
the tabernacle,
and actually occupies the place in our temple that the Ark occupied in the Old Testament temple, whereas the altar was out in the courtyard. Yeah,
exactly. And of course, the Theotokos is very connected with all these things. Right. Particularly in the feast of, her entrance into the temple, which we celebrate in November.
Right.
I mean, all these things come together. And if you interrogate all this with, is that what actually happened?
Right.
Then you're breaking the story and you're missing the point of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and I mean, this is a good place to maybe give some concluding thoughts, right? Which is first that the kind of focus of the Kebra Negast is the association between the possession of the Ark, which is the place where God's glory dwells, right? What is the glory of kings? Well, we were told, spoilers at the beginning, the glory of kings is the mother of God, who is our life, our sweetness, our hope, etc., right? Because the possession of the Ark is the glory of kings. It is the place where God's glory resides, and therefore also legitimate kingship. And that this is a proper Christian way of understanding the idea of divine kingship. It is why every Christian kingdom has the Theotokos as its patron and has as a particular icon, usually, of Our Lady of this place.
Yeah,
right?
I mean,
and even in the name of the church in which the Ark is said to be kept, Our Lady Mary of Zion, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll just say that this also connects very much with something you see only in the Davidic line of kings in the scripture, which is that there's this second throne next to the throne of the king. And, Solomon, who is the one who sets this up for his own mother, the second throne is for the mother of the king, not for the wife, because, for many cases, that could be a lot of different women. Right. But he only has one mother, right?
Right.
Biology still works the way that it does. And so, Christian
Bold
kingship.
Thing to say in 2025.
Indeed. Christian kingship doesn't necessarily mean that there is literally a queen mother at the right hand of the king, like that he's got his mom there, but he has the Theotokos there.
Right.
And so it's because it's Christian kingship, so it's participating in that. And I mean, this doesn't persist in the northern kingdom of Israel. This is only the Davidic line. Mm-hmm. And that the queen mother has this position as sort of the chief advisor, bringing petitions to the king, and that Christ as the son of David, the Messiah, he's the one. His mother is the one who's there permanently. And then the other figure, of course, is at his left hand, just as it was with the Davidic kings, is always the prophet of God, and
right.
That's John the Baptist is the one who's there. That's why what Christ says to his disciples. It's already whoever's at my right hand and left has already been
already been determined. Yeah.
Those seats are reserved.
Yeah.
So I mean, what do you make of this idea? This sort of theft. Like this is the thing that the whole story turns on, right?
It's the thing that makes I think modern people the most itchy, but it is a really important trope in biblical stories and also in hagiography sometimes. And so I'll give a couple of examples of this. So first of all, the thing that you have to understand is that Solomon brought the theft about because he stole something. And the thing that he stole was the queen's virginity. So he tricks her, does the old, switcheroo on her. He tricks her and basically forces her into a situation where she can't keep her honor, like it's between and also live, right? It's the idea. So he tricks her and steals something from her, and that basically comes back around to him. But the thing that is stolen is the glory, so he steals the glory from her, which is her virginity, and the thing that he then loses is also the glory. It's his lady, right? It's the glory of Jerusalem. So that's the first thing to understand, is that the theft happens and therefore is just. And if you wanted to say what's the evil that Israel has committed that justifies the ark of God leaving them, well, if it's nothing else, it's that. Right? And that is, if the idea is of justice, of God's justice in the scriptures, is God sort of rebalancing the scales, right? That's kind of what is happening here. And so it's a way for God to keep his promise that his glory is not going to depart from the house of David, but also to kind of visit judgment upon Solomon. And ultimately, of course, the kingdom is divided, which is symbolized by the tearing of the prophet's garment in the Old Testament. And you've got to think about all the ways that garments play out in this story, especially like the fringe of the garment of the tabernacle and so on. So there are some other stories, though. There are some other stories. My favorite example of this is if you go read the hagiography in the Synaxarion for the placing of the sash, or the placing of the belt of the mantle of the Theotokos, which is actually, weirdly enough, the origin of the feast of the visitation of the Mother of God to Elizabeth on the Western calendar. Long story, but we have another podcast about that if you ever want to listen to it. Basically, it's the idea of three Christian men come and they stay at the house of this Jewish woman, and there are all these people, like Jewish people, all these people flocking to the house for healings and miracles, and they discover it's because they have the garments of the Theotokos there, and so what do? They make a little replica box, they do the old switcheroo, and they carry the garments of the Theotokos back to Jerusalem. Yeah. And it's very clear in the text and the way that the church celebrates this that it's a parallel story to the one that we've just read together, but it is something that God wills. So another example of this is the feast for the translation of the relics of St. Nicholas when they were stolen by Venetians, of all people, stolen from an Orthodox church and taken to Venice. But this theft prevented them from falling into the hands of the Turks. So these are examples of what is sometimes called, the trope is sometimes called like the holy theft, which is like, it is like there's subterfuge, there's theft, there's stealing, but it's something God wills or something God allows in order to preserve a treasure against a coming calamity, or to bless and reinforce the faith of the people of God. And
I was going to say, there's a couple of big themes that really stand out to me in a lot of this, which I think are worth noting here. One is that this is a very Christian view of women. She has full agency in all of this. Like, the only way to get her is by tricking her. And she consents, through all that. But the text really underlines how queenly she is, how intelligent she is.
Right.
All of that kind of stuff.
She's all that.
Yeah. This is not a pagan or even a pre-Christian. I don't want to quite say not a pre-Christian Jewish view, but I mean, it is definitely a Christian view of woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And one that is possible because of her obvious intended parallels between her and the Mother of God. Yeah. Of course, the great thing about the thing of the Mother of God is that she conceives the heir of the line of David without losing her virginity, without losing her, and so it's she's even but I mean, just the fact that Solomon like makes the tabernacle for her, right? And then sort of there's all this cultic language around the incense and the meal and all these different things, right? And then basically steals her glory. And then later the tabernacle is the Zion, his lady Zion is stolen from his tabernacle, right? There's very intentional parallels there.
Yeah. So she functions as a forerunner of the Mother of God in many ways, right, but also a forerunner to the way that Christians view women. But also, and this is to me is where I kind of land on the holy theft. Isn't this also a symbol of the nations coming to worship Israel's God? That this is again a forerunner of that. You Jews say that in Jerusalem is where you worship, but we Samaritans say on this mountain or whatever. And Christ says, it's going to be everywhere. It's going to be everywhere. The place of worship will be everywhere. I mean, and that's, as we said, our altars in our churches are the tabernacle. They are the ark. It has gone out to all the world.
A fun time to read a psalm, actually. A psalm that many of you will have heard throughout Great Lent. Because it's part of the Vespers Kathisma. If your parish reads the Kathisma at Vespers, which mine does. So this is Psalm 88 in our numbering, 87 in the Hebrew numbering. His foundation is in the holy mountains. The Lord loveth the gates of Zion more than all the dwellings of Jacob. So here's a question. It's like, okay, why are the gates of Zion? Why is that contrasted to the dwellings of Jacob? Glorious things are spoken of thee, O city of God. I will make mention of Rahab and Babylon. Why Rahab and Babylon? To them that know me, behold, Philistia and Tyre with Ethiopia. This man was born there. And of Zion it shall be said, this and that man was born in her, and the highest himself shall establish her. The Lord shall count when he writeth up the people that this man was born there. As well the singers and the players on instruments shall be there. All my springs are in thee. So the idea is that an Ethiopian, a Philistine, a Phoenician would say of Zion, Zion is my mother, a man shall say, and I was born in her. I mean, this is this is one of these Old Testament passages which is kind of at the heart of this legend.
Yeah, and is a kind of act of universal history as well. Like, we're all being plugged into this, right, so that this becomes all of our heritage.
If you are a Christian, Zion is your mother, right? And by extension, by the way, if you are a Christian, the Theotokos is your mother.
Yeah, I mean, isn't it what St. Paul says? That Abraham is our father,
right?
Not by being genealogically descended from Abraham, but by doing the works of Abraham.
By the way, I heard somebody say sort of snidely, I think it was on Twitter or something, he's like, oh, well, if you Orthodox think that Mary is the mother of God, what are you saying, David is the ancestor of God? And I was like, yes.
Yes, literally. That is what
do
we're
not
saying.
Like literally that's his title. David, the holy prophet, yes. David, the ancestor. Like do you not understand this is what we're saying, that he became man.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
Yes, I accept your terms. All right. Well, anyway, I think this is a great place to stop. There's tons more here in this text. But I love this story. I love this story so much. It is
good. Thanks for introducing it to me.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite stories, and I just love, I just love Bible stuff, and I love stuff that's like Bible adjacent, and this is such a fun story, and it has so many. Listen, if you get nothing else from the story, it should help you with your typology. It should help. And I say you, audience out there, but it should help people. Yeah. All right. So. Thanks for tuning in today to our discussion of the Kebra Negast. If you were edified by this conversation, please like, subscribe, share, and review. This show's home is on YouTube, but we're also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and other places too.
And if you are watching on YouTube, and those of you who are with us live, make sure that you click the little bell when you subscribe so you get notified every time that we put out a new episode, which is twice a month. And actually this month, because normally our second episode would be in 2 weeks, but that's going to be Holy Week, everybody. Holy Week is coming, you guys.
Yeah, I'm not going to be recording an episode on Holy Thursday.
No. But instead we'll be coming to you next week.
Next week.
1 week from now. 1 week from now. And so in our next episode, we're going to be doing a little bit more Bible adjacent stuff. We're going to be talking what might be the first romance novel. The Second Temple Jewish text.
We might. Hold on. I don't know if we're going to do that.
Oh.
I wanted to do that, and then I had that other cool idea.
Another idea? All right. Well, we'll just say it could be announced. At some point, we're going to talk about Joseph of Nazareth.
We will either read you.
Oh, wow.
So here it is, guys. We'll either give you.
I'm learning something right this second. He's revealing it to me at this moment.
The first romance novel, or we will cover the 11th century Breton retelling of the Apple Plus TV show Severance. But we'll do one of those things.
Wow. Okay.
We'll do one of those things.
Tune in next week to find out which one it'll be. Yes. Amen.